If you're interested in learning how to crush the Caro-Kahn, then stick around, and by the end of this video, you'll know 6 genius traps in the Caro-Kahn. Now we're going to go ahead and dive right in here with the first of our 6 genius traps today. So we have e4, c6, so the core start of the Caro-Kahn defense. A very stingy opening for black, inconvenient to face at times. And we're going to start with our first line. It's not going to take very long, actually. It's a very, very common trap, where you play d4, black plays d5, you play knight c3, and they answer by taking. Of course, you're going to recapture. That is why the knight went to c3. We're going to play knight d7 from black, very common move. And now, very slimy move here by white. We are going to play queen e2. Now you look at that and you go, why would I want my queen in e2? I'm blocking in the bishop, and my queen's not doing anything. Well, you know, it may not look that way. You've possibly seen this before, so I won't spoil it yet if you haven't. If you want to figure out what's going on here, I'm going to put in their next move. Feel free to pause it and try to figure out the solution. It's quite nice. Just a smothered checkmate right in the middle of the board. That's why the queen came to e2, to pin the e7 pawn. So when the knight checked here, it's game over. Now, of course, this is easily the most popular trap we are going to see today, and it's also not that unlikely, especially if you get into this position. You'd be surprised by how many people just blitz out knight f6 here. It's extremely common and definitely worth a shot if you're up for it. I'm going to reset the board, and we're going to move along to our second trap of the day. e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3. So we are going to restart the same line with knight c3. Again, we're going to go takes, knight d7. Same position. This time I will not play queen e2. I understand if you would be hesitant to play that because, you know, it really is just a silly trap with no merit to the position if it backfires. Of course, half the time it's going to get you a quick checkmate, but if you want something a little different and you play this line, might I suggest knight g. Not the most normal looking move, but it quickly becomes clear what we're going after. I mean, you can kind of guess we're going to be targeting f7. And the neat part about this also is they can't even kick the knight out. If they even tried to play h6, now, okay, technically they could, but we have knight e6 here, which is just such a nasty, nasty move. You see, they can't take that knight unless they want to get checkmated. It's absolutely disgusting end to the game. Now, you will have some people do that, or you'll have people play a move like queen b6, getting their queen out of danger. They have no worries now. Well, in this case, you capture the bishop with your knight. If they capture with their king, then their king can't castle and is in an uncomfortable spot. Chances are they'll capture with the knight. If you get them to, you know, willingly get into this position, from a human perspective, that's pretty good. Now, you can look at the eval bar here and see that it's even. You're not playing against an engine, and if you are, then you'll get your rating points back. You're playing against a fellow human being who is going to be completely disgusted having their knights developed like this, being so pitifully developed, no center. All you have to do is just get your pieces out and castle, and you have yourselves a nice position. So all that is to say, if we come back here, h6 is not that much of a concern. In fact, most people don't play h6. That's usually the instinctive move in positions like this, kick out the knight. But because of this knight e6 move, people would just rather not deal with it altogether. And instead, the common move is knight f6. Some sense, you know, develop your piece, get it into the game. In theory, black is only a couple of moves away from castling, and surely they're fine if they castle, right? We're going to be a bit too fast for them here. We're going to play bishop c4. Now, our threat here should be pretty blatant. I mean, if we catch them just completely slacking off here, and say they play h6 now, well, checkmate in one. I don't imagine you're going to get that lucky, but hey, you could dream. Chances are they're going to play e6 and prevent you from capturing that pawn. No big deal. You are going to play queen e2. Not quite an intriguing move. I'm going to once again use our h6 move here to show you our example. So the idea with queen e2 is pretty neat. You want to sacrifice your knight on f7. If they don't recapture the knight, then this is simply a fork on the queen and rook, and you're gonna win material. So obviously that has to be good. Now let's say they do capture the knight. Well, queen takes, forcing king g6, bishop d3, they have to play king h5, and now a nice end to the game is queen h3. This is checkmate. Bishop's doing a good job taking away some flight squares. So we come back a little bit, that is the idea behind queen e2. Again, if they just happen to play h6, I'm not saying they will. I'm just putting that on the board to show you the idea behind queen e2. Most people do find the correct move knight b6. Here you play bishop d3. It's still equal. This is still fine for black, but also it's a rather comfortable position for white at the same time. You know, you're developing well, you have a pawn in the center. Well, what happens if they grab this pawn? You know, that could throw a wrench in your plans real fast. Now you're down a pawn, you have no center pawn. You're still up in development though, and that's going to stay true. Becoming even more true now as you bring another piece into the game, attacking the queen. They'll play queen d5. This is not a problem though. You actually have a funny solution to this. You play knight e5. Yes, you give up the g2 pawn. You play rook f1, common move here, bishop c5, because at the end of it, they couldn't stop you from winning the f7 pawn. So now say you capture with the e knight, and this is a pretty nice position. It may be a little bit awkward, but what are they gonna do? There's not a whole lot for them, and if they're not careful, they could get blown off the board real fast. And they have a rook hanging here, so I would imagine they either move it or they castle. Either way, you could be looking to bring your knight back to e5. If you want a funny continuation, let's say they do castle, I would tell you to play queen h5. The fact you can even play this move is ridiculous, because they can't take the queen without this being a checkmate. Absolutely fantastic. Of course, they don't have to take the queen, but they sure are having to play absolutely perfect to not get blown off the board in this game. Now here, if they find g6, I suppose they're fine. And then you can play on with knight h6 and then queen h4. You know, technically, it's only a little better for you and you're down a pawn. If your opponent just happens to play the correct first, 14 moves, there's only so much you can do about that, you know what I mean? They're bound to mess up far before this, so absolutely trap to figure out if you'd like it. So now we're going to move on to our third trap of the day. So we're going to go e4, c6, d4, d5, f3. Now, if you're familiar with the Caro-Kahn, you have probably heard of the legendary fantasy variation. It's considered not so sound. In fact, a lot of the time, the eval bar will even tell you black is slightly better after a few moves, but people play into it for the practical chances, because it sure can get crazy. Now, we won't go too deep into fantasy variation theory, but I will show you one neat line from the fantasy line. So they will take, you take, and they need to play e5 here. If they don't, your position is already better. This is fantasy variation theory. You play knight f3, they capture, you play bishop c4, and then here it becomes tougher for them to figure out what to play. A lot of people, and for the line we're looking at here, now again, there's no guarantee they're going to check. I just want to put that out there. There are so many other moves that could be played here. I'm not guaranteeing anything. For now, we were looking at this line. If they check, which is a very intuitive thing to do, you play c3 to block the check. And they're going to capture most often. Because at this point, what else are they going to do? Move the bishop again and let you capture? Maybe they come back to b4, you chase the bishop out, and then you capture. They basically just forfeit the pawn back. So no worries there. Most of the time, they're just going to take thinking, oh, yeah, this is great. Why wouldn't I like this? Well, it's because of bishop takes f7. A very, very nice move. Because look at that. If they capture the bishop, they are hanging their queen. Now, they don't have to capture the bishop. The other move would be king e7. We're not going to bother looking at that one too much. I mean, if they play king e7, you play queen b3, and then you're threatening to capture this bishop with check, and then capture this pawn, and you're fine. Meanwhile, their king is not looking too good in the middle of the board. And most people just capture anyway because they get to this position and they think, ooh, I'm gonna take the rook and get a new queen. I'm just gonna be up material. They are correct. They're gonna be up material. In fact, that's what generally happens. You play king d1, they capture the rook and they queen. Yeah, no, they're up a ton of material, but when there's mate and a 5 on the board, it does not matter. If you want to pause the video, take a look and see if you can find the mate and 5, be my guest, go right ahead. Now I'm going to continue forward and put the moves on the board because this is all forced. Knight g5, they have to play king g6, queen e8. They could go to f6, in which case rook f1, bishop f5, rook takes bishop is an easy end to the game. So that's easy enough to spot. King h6, you have to be more selective with your choices here. One move leads to mate, one move doesn't necessarily lead to mate, but still dominant. Everything else is either equal or losing. So better be careful. Move here is knight e6 with a discovered check from the bishop. If they block the check with the pawn, then you take. If they want to stall it with this block, well, you just, and then you get this position, and it's checkmate. Move 15. Quite a nice end. All right, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning now, and we're going to go ahead and get into our fourth trap of the day. e4, c6, knight f3, d5, takes, d4. So now we're looking at more of an exchange variation here. Now this is for anyone who happens to play the exchange or just wants something really easy to play in general. You know, the exchange variations of the Caro-Kahn Defense or any other opening in which there is an exchange defense, it's stupidly easy to play. You just put a pawn in the center and develop, and you're basically fine. Very little weaknesses. However, we are going to find a way for it to go wrong here. So knight c6, normal move. You play c3, so nice little pawn chain here. And then black plays the most common and arguably best move, bishop g4. And you respond to that with bishop b5. And then black generally will play e6. So again, these are all moves that make sense, and you know, it's still equal. But practically, your chances are going up. You play queen a4 here, and black is already in a tough position, right? This is very difficult for black to find the proper way out. So the top move here, I'll tell you guys, the top move here is f6, and just allowing white to capture the knight and go up a pawn. Okay, f6, bishop takes, pawn takes, and then queen takes at the end. I couldn't tell you why f6 is the best move there. That is extremely strange to me. I just know that it is the best move. Most people are not going to play f6 because it doesn't make much sense to just go down a pawn. You know, maybe you'll see, the chances are you'll see a move maybe like knight e7. You know, that's perfectly logical. Try to defend this. Well, then you go knight e5. Well, now what do? Because now the bishop's in danger. So they don't have time to add a new defender to this knight. Even if they wanted to play, you know, say queen c7, they're hanging a bishop. So now they're going to get the bishop out of danger. You capture, they capture, you capture, and we get this position. And you know what? You can look at the eval bar here. Hang on, let me get in one more move, king e7. You can look at the bar here. It says it's barely better. Plus 0.3, a little bit better. I couldn't tell you why that is. You know, white is up a pawn here. Black's king is on e7. White doesn't appear to have, you know, any real weaknesses. If you're worried about development, you should be able to develop pretty quickly. The only thing I could really think of is, you know, black has a bishop pair. I don't think that really means much. That's usually more of an advanced thing anyway. So if you put two humans together playing this game, I guarantee you the win rate is going to be extremely high for white. If you put two computers against each other, 3,000 rating, maybe it's a different story. I don't know. I would just warn you, do not believe what your eyes tell you regarding the evaluation bar, because that is often misleading, especially here. You're just up a pawn. Practically, you're going to be winning the large majority of your games from this position. All right, we're going to go back to move 1 here with e4, c6, and we're moving on to our next line number 5 of the day. Now, move 2, we're going to be looking at knight c3, and then d5, and then knight f3. And this is going to be our position for each of these last 2 lines today, by the way. So first off, if they capture the pawn, what's going on here? Well, you're going to recapture, of course, because nothing else really makes sense. They're going to play bishop f5, and you want to respond to that with knight g3, just giving the bishop a little tap there. And then here, normally, most people play bishop g6, like shockingly, that's by far most popular. I would have thought bishop g4 would be more popular. I checked the statistics, and it's nowhere near as common as bishop g6, so I wouldn't be overly worried about that. But if they do play bishop g4, just kick the bishop out with h3, it's not a problem. But for this line, bishop g6, you get to go h4. Now, I think you can tell what we're trying to do. It becomes pretty apparent that we're trying to go h5 and trap the bishop. So logically, by far, most common moves here for black are h5. Now, if they play h5, not much to worry about here. You go knight e5, and I'm going to put in common moves here. We won't spend as much time on h5 here, since h6 is far more common. But main line goes queen d6, you play d4, they play knight d7, now you capture the bishop, they recapture, you play bishop e2, and it's actually best for them to just give up the h5 pawn, funny enough. You know, I guess they could play knight f6 if they wanted to try to keep guarding it, and I imagine you would play bishop g5, and it's no big deal. You got a lead in development, you got a good center, you don't really have any problems here. So even if you don't win this pawn, you've got a good position, objectively. And I think there's a good chance you just win that pawn anyway, so that's a pretty good line to play into. Now back on move 6, more realistic, if they play h6, as many people do, easy move to remember, you once again play knight e5. They play bishop h7, most common. That's why they play h6, it's to retreat the bishop there. But then you have queen h5, very clear threat on f7. So often they will play g6, you retreat the queen to f3, once again, very blatant threat on f7. They block with knight f6, you move your queen over to b3, and again you have a blatant threat on f7. This time they're gonna put an end to the f7 shenanigans, and they play queen d5. We are in a tough position here, as they offer us a queen trade while attacking our knight, so it would seem our options are very limited. There's one very nice option here, in which we give up our knight. We play queen takes b7. We let them have the knight. We block the check. And we are actually doing quite well here. The rook is hanging, and they can't get to it. There's absolutely nothing they can do. Now we'll put in a move like e6. All right, now you could take the rook right now, and it would be okay. There would be some concern about queen c7 being played, and then you having trouble getting your queen out. If that is the case, you don't have to take the rook right now. In fact, the best move is supposed to be a4, and there are ideas of just running the pawn up later, or maybe you have a rook lift coming. Like if they play bishop g7, you go rook a3. And this is supposed to be a pretty solid position. Moving forward, common move is bishop c5. Again, you could take the rook, and again, you would have some trouble getting your queen out, so you can still hold off on that and play c3 here, and you're building up to d4. But also, you could take first, and then there's another line here where you just go d4 instantly, and basically the bishop gets out. Maybe you come take this pawn. There are a couple of different ways to play it. At some point, you're going to take the rook. It's only a matter of time, so you're up material. You just want to make sure you don't get your queen trapped in there, you know? So I would prefer the slower build up with c3 here. That's what I will recommend to you. And then, you know, let's say, you know, they don't want to get these pieces forked, because why would you? Say they drop the bishop back. Well, you play d4 anyway. We'll give them queen c7. Now we do need to take the rook here. It would be better to just take the rook instead of giving them a chance to stop us. Now they'll castle, and they're thinking, okay, knight d7 with an attack on the queen from the rook. Well, we go bishop h6 here. Yeah, they're not going to be attacking us with the rook at the moment. They're going to have to be moving that rook. And then we have bishop f3 here. And now our point is, if they move this knight, well, this knight no longer guards c6, so then queen takes c6. So we're having to be very careful here, of course. This is ultimately going to be very good for us. If they even played this well to get this far into the line, you're still better. But there is a lot you'd need to know, so there's that, unfortunately. We're going to go ahead and go back to move 3 for our final line of today. After knight f3, not everybody takes that pawn. Some people will play bishop g4, but we get ourselves a nice fun line here as well. So we're gonna play d4. Not at all a common move, because this is not what you would normally expect in these positions. Because what we're getting into is takes, and takes. Not many people are going to see that and resist capturing the free pawn. Take the free pawns. Perfectly understandable. You can check out the bar there. It is actually a good indicator this time around. It is better for white here, because we're gonna play bishop e3. All right, and they have a tough position here. All right, we are already very far ahead in development, despite being down a pawn. No big deal. And now they're staring down our b2 pawn. The best move is to capture it, and that is what most people do. But now we have a surprising move, bishop c4. Our threat is pretty straightforward. We're trying to take on f7. Makes sense. Oh no, our rook. Oh no. Oh no, our other rook. Well, look at that. Mate in 6. Feel free to pause the video and see if you can find out how to checkmate if you want to. I'm gonna go ahead and put some moves on the board though. Not a surprise to see it's queen f7. Black plays king d8. That's the best way to prolong the mate. You take the bishop with check. Black plays king d7. You go knight c5. And then black can play either king d6 or king c7. Either way, it's going to be checkmate in 3 moves. We'll go king d6, knight e6, king d6 now, bishop f4, king d7, queen d8. So all of your pieces getting involved here, both bishops, the knight, and the queen. Very nice and active position. Now we'll go back just a little bit. Obviously in this position, they do not have to take the rook. You know, if they want to, they can play queen f6 and give up their queen for the knight. We're not going to have any concerns if they do that. And if they play a move like knight f6 to block our queen from f7, well, we just take the now hanging queen on a1. So that's the position they just put themselves into if they take the rook on a1. And that is what the vast majority of players will do, which makes this such a neat trap to end on for today. And anything else they could do, I guess they could try to play normal, like knight f6, but then we're going to castle, and then you can look at putting your rook on b1 and then bringing it up to b7 after that. And it's just, you have a great lead in development. Despite being down a couple of pawns, it doesn't even feel like it with the developmental lead you have and the pressure on their queen, the pressure on f7. It's all so good if they happen to play all the perfect moves, which doesn't happen that often. So that's a nice trap to end on for today. That was 6 genius traps in the Caro-Kahn Defense that you've just learned. Congratulations. If you're interested in learning the 4 best openings for white, by the way, then click the video that is appearing somewhere here on the screen. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video.